Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone wherever you may be tuning in today's episode from around the globe. We're back here in Brisbane, Australia, once again hosted by the Mint Group of Companies studio. Thank you, Mr. Gary Radford, once again for allowing us to use his studio, this amazing setup that he has here in Brisbane. Today I'm joined who I would argue to be the top salesperson in the Australian rental industry. One of the most industry connected and experienced rental industry figures, very much known for his personal approach to old school sales, and said that his glass half full outlook on life is contagious to those around him. Today I'm accompanied by Kevin Ennis from CEA Group. Welcome on the Rental Journal, Kev.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, thank you. We've obviously crossed paths many a times at industry events here in Australia. You coming up to our facility in Queensland last September with your famous Eskies for the Knights raffle. And I know your name's been brought up on multiple occasions to Mark to come on for an episode with your extensive career in the industry. So I'd say today's very overdue. So thank you for coming on.
You're welcome, mate.
Kev, to kick us off, you've had an extensive career in the rental industry over 35 years, experiencing both equipment rental companies and now working as a supplier with CEA, initially joining the equipment rental industry with the famous Rec Air Hire after your time at Expo 88, working at Vermeer Australia, Coates Hire, Conplant, Red Star, and now CEA Group. How did you first become involved, and what's your overview of your journey so far in the equipment rental industry?
Well, it's an interesting one. I was a wood machinist by trade, so I did my trade for 4 years. I worked as a wood machinist for 5 years. I used to work in one of Australia's biggest furniture factories, and I'd stand there at the end of a machine and look at the clock on the wall, and I swear the minute hand would be going backwards, and it was pretty boring in parts. So I kept saying to myself, there's got to be something different, and there's got to be something better. I've got to be able to do something a bit different. So I decided, I was telling my mates about it, and I remember the exact date. It was January the 17th, 1986. You wouldn't have even been born then. Sitting around a pool at a furniture factory where we were, and I just said, it's got to be something better. So I decided that I was going to go overseas for a year, and one of the guys that I barely knew said, do you mind if I come with you? So we went overseas a year to that date. We went overseas it was about just over 12 months. When I was over there, I obviously loved talking to people. I had such a good time. I came back, and I was fortunate to come back into a job at Expo 88. So 1988, Expo 88, I set up season pass photography stands for all the season passes for the expo. Met heaps of people, and from there I got into another role at Expo called, it was a ticketing transaction role. So there was a lot of people that had to get upgraded. They tried to sneak in on a concession ticket, and so I had to greet all these irate people that I had to charge them full fare. And our division actually made $1 million over that period from upgrading from concession to adult. I really enjoyed the conflict side of it and talking to people, and I consider myself quite good at it. So I decided then that all I wanted to do was to get into sales. I'd spoken to some family members that were very good at sales, and that's what I decided I want to be. When I was there, I had some really good advice by one of the senior managers there. She was in charge of about 200 people. She pulled me to one side and said, what are you going to do? And I said, what I really want to do is I want to get into sales. And she spoke to me about career paths, and it really resonated with me, and particularly career paths where you join a business that had depth and you didn't actually have to look from point A to point B and go all the way to the top straight away. But she spoke about downward paths and sideward paths to get to where you eventually wanted to be. So I took that on board, read one of the papers, and I saw an article for a storeman at Rec Air Hire, and I'd known Rec Air Hire. They had some large depth, and they had businesses or branches all over Australia. So I decided I was going to go for this storeman's job. So I went in and I met the state manager there, Chris Holmes, and the state service manager was a guy called Alan Waterson. Most people that have been around Rec Air have known these guys. They're great guys. Had the interview, and of course they loved me, and they offered me the job. And so we shook hands, said I'd start the next day. And as I was leaving, I said to Chris, by the way, I don't want to be a storeman. And he said, well, what the F are you doing here, mate? And I said, all I want to do is I just want to do sales. I'll do whatever it takes to get into sales. So he put me in a bit of a bear hug and he said, stick with me, son, and we'll go places. And we did. I was at Rec Air for over 13 years, and my goal was always to be in sales. And so I did about 13 or 14 different roles along the way, and eventually it got to a point where I was a marketing assistant to the sales manager there, and it worked out well. But along that journey, I was a purchasing manager there for probably 12 months, and so I used to have a lot of reps come in, and because I knew I wanted to be in sales, I used to really take on board what they did well and what they didn't do so well, and I put that back into the bank, the memory bank, and because I relied on that in all my future dealings. So I kept going back to that experience, what I liked in that person and what I didn't like in that person, and yeah. So from there, I sort of moved around a little bit, but I was always in the rental game. I spent a bit of time at Complan as well with the Coleman boys, and a bit of time. Well, I spent some time with Jeremy Shaw there, so he was one of my young reps at the time, and like I've just been so fortunate to spend some great time with some great people over those years, and obviously this last stint now I've been, well, it's Atlas CEA now, part of the CEA group, but it was Red Star Equipment, part of On-Site, and then we eventually were bought by CFC Group, which is CEA. So that's been almost 14 years now. So, but I've been very fortunate to be on both sides of well, I've been a customer, I've been in the rental game, and I've actually been a supplier to the rental game, and I love the industry, and I owe a lot to the industry. So, I think that's about it. I've had a lot of experience. I've met a lot of people, so it's been a good journey for me.
So initially starting as a storeman with Rec Air Hire, just prior to filming today, we were talking about the glory days of what people saw as Rec Air Hire. What was that first day like at Rec Air, 30 something years ago, and what was that introduction into sales at a business like Rec Air Hire?
Well, the introduction to sales for me was literally back in the day we had call cards. So we had a little timber box with all my call cards in it. I had a guy basically run through that, and I took over his territory. And I literally went on the road, and that was basically my training. There's your area. Here's your customers. Grow the list of calls where you can, your call cards, and try and call everyone and go and see everyone, knock on everyone's door. It was never making a point. It was just knock on the door. But interestingly, my very first call that I ever did, I can remember it, and I actually call it my best call I ever did, because it was the worst call I ever did, and I learned so much from it. So I saw a guy called Kevin Lenham, worked for BMD back in the day. I remember this distinctly, and I made the mistake of calling on this building site at lunchtime. Everyone was in the lunchroom, all the boys were in the lunchroom. Back in the day, we used to have to wear a tie, and I just raw. I had no experience at all. Knocked on the door, walked in with this tie. Everyone's looking at me, and it was just the most embarrassing thing. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't do any planning at all. So yeah, it was the worst call. I remember walking out the door. I can still hear the guys laughing when I walked out that door. So from there, I was so determined. I could have easily hung up my boots then. I was so embarrassed. But what I've always done is I've always analysed how, whenever I talk to someone or I go for a visit, whatever it is, I try and do a self-analysis. And I didn't learn this from any sales training. I decided I wanted to get better at what I did. So I analysed myself and I said, what did I do well? What could I have done a lot better? And I had no planning at all. I didn't have a plan A or a plan B. I wasn't prepared. So like I said, it was the worst call of my life, but it was probably the most valuable call that I've ever done. And I still remember that to this day. So.
Yeah, I've heard from so many people in the industry, and as they reflect on their introductory into sales as being receiving yellow pages, getting the corporate uniform and a business card, and sent on their way. And it's very similar to obviously your experience with those call cards as well. It's interesting how it has progressed over the years, but everyone does seem to have that very similar background of their introductory into sales in the equipment rental industry.
Yeah, well, I set myself a goal of doing 60 calls a week. So, and it was easy in the early days because I had a brand new set of, clients. They didn't know me, I didn't know them. So I needed to qualify with them who they were and, so they could know me as well. That was easy. But the longer I got into that role, I was struggling to get my 60 calls, but I was determined to do it. So there'd be a Friday afternoon, and it'd be 3:30. I'd have 2 more calls to make on a Friday afternoon, and that's unheard of now. I don't think too many people do many calls after 3:30 on a Friday, but that. I was just determined to do that. So but it certainly has changed. They were the days where you could just walk into an office and people would see you, but now things are totally different now.
Kev, exactly 1 year ago today, actually, last November at the HRA Queensland AGM, you received an amazing acknowledgement from a President's Award from a past president in Tony Crane. Firstly, congratulations on the award, and I'm sure it was an amazing accolade to receive from such an experienced and well-respected leader of our industry in Tony Crane. Kev, a past colleague of yourself, Guy Tome, actually presented you with this award that you worked alongside with at Vermeer and at Complant. And presented you with this and told a very interesting story of his first day working alongside yourself and going through the Ennis sales training program, as he called it. I'd love to read this short story from Guy about his experience.
Yeah, sure.
His Sales 101 tutorials were based on customer service, relationships, and hard work. He was always a guy that led from the front, but always had a few tricks up his kit as well. One of these tricks was how he used to get people to remember his name. When he was first starting out as a sales rep, was to go into client meetings with his hard hat. Most of these meetings are office-based, but he would take them in either way. The idea was not to protect himself from a falling stack of A4 paper, but he would tuck the hard hat under his arm with Kevin written in big letters across the front of it, which benefited both the customer and himself. Today, Kev, I've actually got a hard hat here, supplied by Gary Radford, and I'd love for you to tell this story, an approach that you've used, and I think it's such an amazing way to recap your approach to sales in the equipment rental industry.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Well, Guy's a bit of a legend for me too. We've got a lot of history together, so thanks for those words, Guy. So part of that experience when I was talking about Rec Air Hire, when I was in the purchasing department, I used to have I'd probably have 3 reps a day, sometimes up to 5, and you'd have that 5 days a week. And these guys, although I'd seen them 4 or 5 times, I'd never remember their names. And it was very uncomfortable. It made me feel really uncomfortable, and I couldn't relax until I kept racking my brain, what's this guy's name? And so that was one of the lessons that I took away. And so from then on, whenever I was in front of people, I always had the hard hat, or I had the diary with my name on it, or whatever I could do. I'd always hand over a business card. I'd have some clients that would have 15, 20 business cards, and I'd always tell them it's a new business card. But I just didn't want them to feel uncomfortable, and because it made me feel really uncomfortable. And you can just relax a lot easier as well. And look, I guess at the end of the day, there's a lot of reps and people see a lot of them. And for me, it was a bit of a win when people would see you and they would know your name and they'd say, hey, Kev, how's it going? And all that. I know it's only a little thing, but I got my little mark across and I, it worked for me. It worked for me well. And at Rec Air, we always used to have people's name on their shirts. And I've been to a lot of building sites, and for me, that just worked a treat with having your name on your shirt or a hard hat or whatever it was. So it was really important for me that people knew who I was. And you saw that photo of me before with the big mo, and they always recognised me with the big moustache. And and they knew who I was. They called me Mo Man, or he goes Big Kev with the Mo. But yeah, that was how it used to work for me, and it worked very well for me.
You have a lot of confidence as a sales rep, but from these stories, it obviously didn't start that way. You developed all these skills and tools that now you utilize for people to remember your name and have those small wins. Do you think that was a way that you did build confidence initially as a sales rep, to have those little wins of he knows my name? And
well, look, I just continually set myself goals, and my very first territory was the north side of Brisbane, and I'm a south side Brisbane boy, and you never really crossed the river at all. So one of my goals was not to get lost in one day. Like I would drive around and I'd continually get myself lost, and I'd have to set myself these goals, these little goals like that. And that was a little win to go for a day without getting lost. But most of the times I benefited from getting lost, and I ran into people or sites that I didn't know were there, and that was a big win. But yes, I always set myself some goals and the little wins along the way. And you say that I'm confident. I am confident in some abilities, but in others, in some aspects, but in others I'm not. And I continually question myself, and I continually want to try and be better at what I do. And I don't know. Maybe that's a difference in some other people, but I continually try and improve the way that I do things. And I do take little wins. And one of the things that I really learned along the way is you need to celebrate your wins, no matter how big or small they are. And I've always remembered that. I remember a guy told me that quite a few years ago, and it's important that you do celebrate your wins, no matter how big they are or small they are. So,
Kev, just prior to filming today, we were talking about you going overseas and experiencing Barcelona and Spain with Atlas CEA and the factory there. You've obviously seen a lot of the world, from being involved in the equipment rental industry, being overseas, at trade shows, building relationships and experiences whilst in the equipment rental industry. Where have been the top places the industry has taken you so far?
It's really, look, I've been really fortunate to see a lot of the country and a lot of overseas as well. So I guess a lot of people in sales and in hire aspire to go to all the big four trade shows around the world. And, you've got Munich or Bauma, Germany. You've got Intermat. I went to Intermat. That was the very first show that I went to. So I would have been 28 years old or 29 years old or something like that. It was amazing. You go to all these hire and rental shows, and I literally went to one, a local show, and then 2 weeks later, or a week later, I was in Intermat, and it's just gobsmacking. So, yeah, Munich, Intermat, obviously Con Expo, Vegas, and China. But I've been fortunate to see a lot of Asia, Singapore, Japan, China. But, it's amazing to see all those places. It really is. And it's amazing to see some of the facilities and factories and stuff like that. But in a nutshell, I really love going to regional Queensland. I've seen a lot of Australia. I really have seen a lot of Australia. And my favourite is that little run out. And I actually have taken Guy out there a few times, but out sort of west of Mitchell, all the way out to Winton, Longreach, Boolyah, Baduri. You've got Birdsville out there, and my very favourite is Thargomindah. So just the people are real people, and you can have. I've had many beers with the mayors and their councillors and stuff like that, and they're just great people. And so yeah, to me, I like getting out in those really remote areas. And I remember I did a stint there. I left on a Sunday afternoon, got back on a Saturday morning. I did nearly 5,000 kilometres. I saw 9 people, and but I come away with 9 orders for, I think minimum order was 140 grand or something like that. So, it was worthwhile seeing these people, but it took a while. Those people out there, you've got to spend your time and you've got to do your due diligence, and they probably don't respect you until you've been there 3 or 4 or 5 times. So, yeah, like I said, I've seen a lot of the world, but give me Western Queensland anytime, or Northern Queensland. It's just a great spot to be, and some of the remote places I've been, in Western Australia and all over the place. It's been great for me. It really has.
Yeah, that relationship building is so important as a sales rep, especially in the equipment rental industry. What would you say is the biggest importance of relationship building at these trade shows, these industry events that have impacted your network and your career of getting to know obviously like-minded people within the industry, but also building those relationships with your obviously extensive customer base now, 35 years in?
Well, look, the trade shows are critically important for me. And I guess a lot of people would say this, but for me to see, if I see 30, 40 people at a trade show, I'm seeing all the right people. It would take me probably 6-9 months to see that amount of people, and they're scattered all over the country. So I've always believed in particularly the hire and rental trade show. I'm heavily invested in that. I tried to count how many I've been to. I reckon it's got to be at least 17 or 18 of them. It's got to be. But we put a lot of effort into those because it's really important for me. I'm pretty anal about the shows. Like, I'll do all the setup now. There'll be a couple of people. There'll be two of us setting up a big stand because I know how important it is, how it looks to other people and what we should be achieving. Whereas if you've got other people, you're relying on other people. I know it sounds a bit old school, but I know what's important, and I know what people need to see and the different angles and how things have got to look. But yeah, it's a great forum to see a lot of people in a short amount of time. The only problem is trying to get to say good day to everyone. And I've been to trade shows with people who've been lining up to have a chat, and other people are trying to talk to them and go, no, we want to talk to Kev. But I've developed most of my customers are my friends, and I've got relationship there. I've got skin in the game with these guys and girls, and I just love what I do, and this is a really good forum to see those people and spend some good quality time. And you see them through the day, and you can have a beer with them at night. It's a great experience. There's nothing better for me. It's a great experience, and I love it.
It's definitely condensed chaos over those couple of days, especially I would assume as a salesperson in the industry, those couple of days, it's everyone in the industry in one place. So it's definitely would be an amazing tool and resource, and probably one of the biggest days of your year is one of our HRA shows, or even when you get over to Con Expo. Like you said, Kev, you've been to nearly 20 shows here in Australia, Con Expo in Vegas, Bauma, all these trade shows. What would you say is your best memory or best story from a rental industry event across the world?
Well, I knew you'd ask this, but look, there's a lot of stories over a few beers, and obviously we don't want to talk about those. And this might sound a bit dull, but I had an experience at a local trade show about 5 or 6 years ago with a big rental company. There was all the senior guys of a big rental company, and we had this new product, and it was a skid-mounted lighting tower. And back in my rec air days, I used to be the guy that used to deliver the mobile lighting towers, take the wheels off them, jack them up, take the wheels off, and then come back 3 months later, 6 months later, put the wheels back on, tow it back, and when it's off hired. And I was a massive believer in these skid-mounted lighting towers, and no one else seemed to have the faith in them that I did. And I remember we're having this robust discussion about skid-mounted lighting towers are never going to cut it in the hire industry. And I kept saying, they have to work. I know that they're going to work. It's obviously there's applications for this, but it's a great idea. And trust me, from someone who's been there. And so anyway, 6 years on, I reckon I personally have sold over 1,000 of those skid-mounted units. And I know it's not that exciting, but to me it was a big win because I had so much belief in this because of the experience that I had in the rental game. I didn't want want anyone else to be jacking up the lighting towers and taking off the wheels and that. So that was a big win for me. And look, I've got plenty of stories. I've been to some incredible places. One of the things that related to a trade show, I was with the Complant guys, and we were going to Germany, and we were in this minibus, and there was 4 of us in this minibus and the driver. And I remember trying to put my seatbelt on. We're going down one of the autobahns, and I couldn't get my seatbelt on. And Doug Coleman's sitting in the front seat, and he says to me, "Kev, don't worry about putting your seatbelt on. We're doing 160 k's an hour at the moment, so if we have a crash, none of us are going to make it anyway." So, yeah, there's all those little stories that I have, and it makes my job really great. Like, that's what I look forward to, is going to those trade shows and having some wins and having some good times along the way as well.
So obviously, like you said, being in a very unique position as a salesperson, experiencing the end user as well as being in a rental company, having to jack up the light tower and now knowing what to sell people because you've had that experience yourself. Do you think that's really benefited you now working with CEA those years at Rec Air and Coates, that you've actually worked on the product to know what to sell to people?
Definitely. But I guess my journey... and look, we always talk about Rec Air Hire, and everyone, I think people are sick about people talking about Rec Air Hire, but they did it so well back then. Like I said, I had probably 13 different roles in 14 years. We really learnt a lot of aspects of the business, a lot of aspects on, even in the workshop, starting machines up and all that sort of stuff. But when you got to be in front of the customer, you basically knew what you were talking about. You knew it was a real education, and that has benefited me. Like, I don't confess to know everything about, and as a matter of fact, I'm not very technical, but I know enough about it, a lot of things to keep me going. And I'm never going to lie to anyone and try and smoke and mirror what I know. I'll tell them I don't know. I'll find out the information, but I do know enough to get around most situations where I can. But certainly that experience has been invaluable for me in whatever I've done. And I can hear myself talk sometimes, and it sounds like I really know what I'm talking about, because I've been the guy that's had a flooded machine, or people put on e-stops on, or all the stuff that's gone wrong, run out of fuel 1,000 times. I've experienced those calls, and I sort of have learnt from that. So I try and do some sales training now, and I try and part some of that information about even the terminology, what people call things are so much different. And you need to know 5 different names for one thing, And but anyway, it's certainly benefited me from the way I've journeyed through, and that experience will that has certainly helped me today.
Kev, you mentioned mentoring and sales training just then, and in 2019 you participated as a mentor in the HRIA Women in Hire program. The program is designed to give women opportunities to help grow themselves, their leadership skills, develop confidence for a long career in the equipment rental industry. You're quoted by saying, "I enjoyed sharing my knowledge and experience, and it made me feel like I was giving back to an industry that has given me so much." I'd love to hear your experience from a mentor's perspective in this program, what you got out of it, what your mentee gained, and some success stories from that year in 2019.
Well, I think I've been mentored to 5 people now from then, and I think some get a lot out of it, and it just depends who it is. And my forte is sales, and I try where I can, but I always sort of resort back to that sales experience. And my very first young lady was Ellen Haywood, and she was amazing. I think she's going places at the moment, and she's doing really well. And look, I think she had it she had it already, but I just wanted to help and probe and get her thinking about what her abilities are. The problem with where I've come from in Rec Air, and I was actually mentored. There was a lot of people in my life at Recce Hire, but there was a husband and wife team called Daryl and Sandra Greenwood, and Sandra was amazing. She knew everything, and we're talking back in the late 80s, early 90s. So not a lot of women around in the rental industry, and the guys didn't really respect the women in that industry and didn't think they knew a lot. But Sandra knew more than most, and she taught me so much. And she obviously was very resilient because it was a tough old industry to be in as a woman. So I always relate back to that. And Sandra gave me a lot, and I wanted to. I remember that, and I think I just wanted to help women out, and because they deserve to be in our industry now. It's an awesome career for anyone to be in, and there's some great opportunities for women in our industry. So, I love doing that. Sometimes I feel that I could give more, but it is difficult because they've got some time. They need to spend time. I need to spend time. So. Yeah, I enjoy it, and I think I've helped quite a few people out with that one. So
you obviously mentioned Sandra as an amazing mentor for you initially when you joined the industry. Over the past 3 decades, I'm sure you've worked alongside some amazing people and built great connections and working relationships with. You've been a mentor to many. We've mentioned obviously Guy Tome today. I know you've played a massive part in the role of Jeremy Shaw, our national president. Career also now being the sales manager at Master Hire. In your career and your life, who have been some mentors to you like Sandra that have really helped shape Kevin Ennis to the person you are today, and also your career in the industry?
It's a good question. There's so many people. There's so many, and the Rec Air Factor was amazing for me. It was one of the best jobs I ever did, and everyone. It was just a different style of management back then. Like, we were all encouraged to respectfully challenge people, and that stuff like that I was never used to. And once you get into that groove, it's so good. So there was guys like, obviously I spoke about Chris Holmes and Alan Waterson, Richard Greenwood, who worked at Rec Air for many years and retired from Coates recently. Played a massive role in my younger career at Rec Air. Like I spoke about the Coleman brothers, and that was good. Ian's a bit of a dry fella, but he had a lot to pass on to me as well. So I spent a lot of time at Dompra Hire there as well, and I worked with Andrew Donald. He now owns Total Generators, so he's very successful in that business now. We had a lot of good times together. We spoke about Gary Radford. He worked for me as a young rep a couple of times actually. So I've spent a lot of time with them. I think I've parted some information to them, and I've certainly learnt a fair bit from them as well. But I guess if I've got to boil it down to one guy, there's a guy called Mark Rich, and he recently passed away this year. And he was my CEO for a couple of companies that I worked with, and the last one was at Onsite when I was Red Star, part of the Onsite group. And that guy taught me a lot, and we did a lot of negotiations, and he taught me to be really resilient and not to let go of an opportunity, and just try he was the guy who taught me have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and whenever I went into a call and it sort of steered one way, I tried to take it, to my plan B, and then if that didn't work, I'd try and use my plan C. And he taught me so much, and he taught me how to how important what you say to people and what people can remember years later of what you said, and particularly in a management role, sometimes we say stuff without thinking, but it can have a major impact on people. And I used to do a little cheat sheet for Mark every time he came into our branch, and as he walked in the door, it'd have the name of the person to the left, to the right, and as he walked around the corner, and a little personal bit about each one of those people. And he was so personable. So he taught me how to be personable, and but there was also a tenacious part of him as well, and not to let go of something. And there's an opportunity, just keep going and walk away reluctantly, but hopefully most of the times we can have a win out of that. He was a great guy, and I do miss him, and I'm sure others miss Mark as well.
Kev, a great quote that I'd love for you to expand on is, great salespeople are relationship builders who provide value and help their customers win. In addition to this quote, after speaking with Guy Tome, he passed on his perspective of your values and your drive as a salesperson and what he gained from you as well, which I think perfectly relates back to this quote. One thing that Kev taught me above all else was how key trust and integrity was in working relationships with both your customers and people that you worked with. The relationships that Kev has formed have been paramount to his success and says a lot about him as a person as well. Kev, your approach to sales seems to be so much based on relationships and customers and a future together. What's some advice that you would give to new people entering sales in the equipment rental industry going forwards?
Yeah, that's a good one. Look, I think most importantly is to be honest. You need to be honest, and look, if you start telling little white lies here and there, it catches up with you, and it's not good. If you want to build a relationship with someone, tell them the truth. If the machine's not suited or the application's not suited, tell them it's not suitable. I've had customers that have asked me about whether a certain machine would be suitable for their application. And I've said absolutely not. It's got a single cylinder engine. You like big engines. You're going to hate it. You're not going to like it. So I've probably lost a couple of machines down that way, but I reckon I've picked up heaps more because of that. So be honest, persistent, be persistent. I really, for me, what I got a lot out of my sales life is always self-analysing the way that I do things, and what could I have done better? What did I do well? Always, what did I do well? I don't want to beat myself up too much, but what could I have done better? And I'd write it down, and I'd take notes, and when I'd go into the next appointment, I'd use that and ensure that I didn't make that same mistake again. A big one for sales guys is, like, whenever I talk to sales guys, I always make sure that they listen to the client, and I just tell them to shut up. Listen to the client and listen to what they have to say, and ask them probing questions and ask about their situation. But more importantly, if you know the answer straight away, you're not going to jump in and tell them straight away what the answer is. Understand exactly what their situation is before you go and give them the solution. And I guess nowadays it's really important that you become an integral part of people's businesses, and to a point where they can't do what they do without your company or without you. I think it's critical these days, because it's so easy for someone to buy these days. They can get online, and they, like back in the day, I used to take a brochure to someone and explain to them a machine and talk about different bits of a machine. You don't get that opportunity anymore. They can dig that up online, and they actually have got all that information. They've probably got 5 different brands in front of them, and they've probably made the decision before you've even got there what they want. So I think importantly, it's to ensure that you're an integral part of their business. I think that's the only way, yeah. And to obviously have a relationship. A lot of people do, they send quotes through via email. They don't even talk to people. They don't know who they are. For me, it's a last resort to send a quote through via email without even talking to someone, or without even visiting them. Or I always would do that as a last resort. I like face to face, and I guess one day that'll die. But I think as long as you can find an excuse to get into someone and talk to them, you're going to have a far better opportunity to get a result.
The words you just used were obviously persistency, self-accountability, listening, and honesty. They're all words very much focused for a long-term relationship, for the future. You're not looking for those short wins in your sales.
No. I've never been, like, for me, if someone buys whatever it is, something for $10, $100. For me, that's a win because we're getting that person into the process of purchasing and feeling confident about your product and you and I've never been one for chasing the big sales all the time. I love sales and I'll take anything seriously. As long as they're people are ordering or buying, I don't care what it is or how big it is. But obviously, I love doing what I do, and I think that builds the relationship later on down the track when the big orders start coming through.
As a supplier, what have you seen to be the hardest part, especially over the last 3 years with COVID has been a massive issue with supply chain, staffing, product line or product availability even. Here in Australia, I know it's definitely impacted the US as well when I was at the ARA show this year. What have been some of the biggest challenges for you as a salesperson during this very strange and difficult time that none of us have ever experienced?
Yeah, well, I guess the first one is trying to get Teams set up on my computer. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and just having faith in teleconferences and stuff like that. Never done them before, and they were great, but they serve a purpose as well. But some of the big challenges was obviously me setting up my personal devices and without cutting out and stuff like that. But the obvious ones with supply issues and pricing, like pricing over the last 3 years has just been insane. So that's been difficult, but there's a couple of things now where we've had to basically overstock. A lot of people, you couldn't get anything, so you kept placing orders, and now they're all starting to flow through. So I think you'll find there'll be a lot of supply issues coming through with a lot of people. They'll have a lot of supply, and obviously you got to develop a strategy to move them on. But that was one. Componentry was very difficult. So I'm still getting machines that we ordered 2.5 years ago. So that's hard, and particularly when people are planning and they placed orders 2.5 years ago and the gear's still not here. But it's very rare now, but it's still an issue. Some of the biggest things over that period, over that last 3 years, was the environmentally friendly products. So all that coming through now, where people are really focusing on that. So that's a big issue. 4 years ago, we knew about products, but there wasn't that need or there wasn't that inquiry for that. But now it's a critical part of people's business now to make sure that they have green friendly machines, and there's a lot of policies coming into play where they need it. So I used to say, I remember talking to the factories 8 years ago, and I'm saying, what's a diesel bit of equipment going to look like in 7 years' time? And no one could answer me. And then, 3 years ago, I've asked that question every year. What's it going to look like? What's it going to look like? Now we're starting to see what it looks like, and it'll be a major part of what we do now, particularly around diesel products. You'll see a lot more electric, a lot more battery, and that'll be the new generator or the new compressor. There'll be new machinery that will come up, and in the next 5 years, it'll be even different. So there's definitely some changes, and COVID was interesting with particularly around that pricing and that supply. It made it difficult for us.
Kev, you've worked alongside a lot of high achievers throughout your time in the industry. We've obviously mentioned Jeremy Shaw being the sales and marketing manager at Master High, Guy Tome, the national sales manager at Conplant, and even Gary Radford now owning Mint Group companies. From your perspective, what have been some common traits that you've seen from successful salespeople throughout the years?
Yeah, definitely. I think persistence is definitely one of them, and they all those guys have their own unique little personalities, and but I think their determination to win, and look, I know from my experience, I don't do it for the dollars. I do it because I want to win. I want to be able to look after my clients. there's a lot of reasons why I do what I do, and money doesn't really come into much of a play. It's more looking after the guys that I have and being honest. And all these other guys have got similar traits. You've got to be honest. You've got to be persistent. And I think that self-determination, that self-drive is important because, mate, in this game, it is a roller coaster of emotions. I've always said that. And you've got your highs and your lows, and hopefully you've got more highs than lows. And you've got to learn how to deal with that because it's a tough business, particularly when you're under the pump to get results, and you need to keep plodding away, and you've got to keep going. And yeah, so that determination doesn't come with everybody, and some people have got it and some people don't.
You said that your approach of the email being the last resort and you want to go and meet people face to face and experience with that customer. How have you seen person-to-person sales has changed over the last 35 years, or how do you see it will evolve over the next 10?
That's another great question. You're asking some good ones. So look, up until recently, I've had a new management change, and they asked me what sort of goals have I got, what sort of training do I want, what sort of sales training, and I said I don't want any more sales training. I've had enough. And anyway, I went to a sales training forum last week, and one of the things that I thought I knew everything, and this young 30-year-old woman gets up there, and the first thing she asked me is, how many people here have been selling for over 20 years? And most of us put our hands up, and she said, out of the buyers in the last 20 years, has the buying process changed? And of course it's changed. It's changed over the last 20 years. And I knew what was coming. And then she basically said, so what have you done to change to adapt to that change in the buying process? And I think they're the questions that you've got to ask yourself. And that really hit home with me. And I had to eat some humble pie there. And I was the first one to put my hand up, because it was really thought provoking. And what do you do to change? Like young fellas like you coming through, and like I've got relationships with a lot of people, but it's these young guys that really aren't the young people in the business. They've done their homework. They know what they want, and they're not interested in a relationship. So, like I said before, you got to somehow make sure that you become part of an integral part of their business. Person to person, I think it's still critical that there's personable relationships. It will be harder to get in front of people, but I think you've just got to find the reason to get in front of people. And I think when you're in a call and you're in front of someone, like I've always questioned myself and challenged myself to ensure that there's a takeaway from the meeting. You don't want to have a meeting for meeting's sake, and like you might get in to see the highest person in the business, but if you don't have something to offer, or if it's not, if they don't get something out of it, you're not going to get another foot in the door. So you need to have a takeaway for both parties when you're in these meetings. This is my belief that so you set yourself a goal to have a takeaway and make sure there's something interesting. So whenever I go in, I talk about bags, having a bag of tricks, and the more offers you can have, the more that you can offer someone, the better it is. If you're only selling one item, it makes it a lot difficult to be in front of people. So I guess in the next 10 years, I still think you need to have relationships with people, but it's going to be more difficult. It's definitely going to be more difficult because you won't be getting, like you looked at COVID, you weren't allowed to have face-to-faces with anybody. You literally had to do your business, via Teams. So potentially there'll be a lot more of that. Hopefully not, because I get a big kick out of meeting people and trying to help people where I can. I think it's really important.
My favourite Kevin Ennis lesson anyway is that you first told me when I initially joined the industry and first met you at a HRA event here in Queensland was your power of a business card technique, and I've always remembered that.
Yeah.
And I really like the frame that you use there, so I'd love for you to expand on that topic and that story that you've told me.
Yeah, it all stems back from obviously making sure people know who you are, but there'll be times where, and I'll do it here for Gary. Gary's not here today, but I'll leave my card on his desk, and it's just a little reminder that I was here and, I was there. But I think it's so important, like you buy 500 business cards and it costs you $200. So, it's not a lot of money for a business card these days. And even now, I think, like, if you go to knock on someone's door and they're not there, I'll put it in the sill of the door. If it's a lunchroom, I think I was one of the first ones to sort of start that, where you'd go into an office, a lunchroom, and slide your business cards at the door. So you'd walk in, and I'd basically see how many business cards I could get, on the door there. But look, you got nothing to lose, and people know that you've been there. If they don't know you've been there, it's pointless. And even if you don't get to see them, at least they know that you tried to get there. You can give them a call afterwards, and they potentially say that, I noticed that you were here. Another thing, back in the day, I used to hand out desk pads, and I used to write a little message on the desk pad and leave it there, and little things like that. I don't know, I call it quirky, but I just think for the a 1 cent cost of a business card, what have you got to lose?
Nothing to lose.
And hand them out. Like, just don't hand them out on a Friday night in a nightclub, but it's all good.
Kev, what was the realization moment when you went, yep, the hire and rental industry and sales was your passion and something that you would have for 35 years down the track and a career for a lifetime? Was there a specific light bulb moment that hit you that you went, yep, this is for me?
Look, for some reason, like when I said I travelled overseas, I just really enjoyed talking to people, and it was so different from what I was used to, working in a factory, just standing, looking at the clock and the minute hand going backwards. So for me, I just had this drive that sales is what I want to do. In that, probably that 18-month period where I was overseas and I worked at Expo there, something just resonated with me about talking to people, and that's what I wanted to do. I was just driven to do that, and but I guess along the way I got better at it, and it just sort of got infectious, and I just was always continually challenge myself to succeed and to win. I remember. Well, particularly in the high game, you'd go to all these clients, and I was part of the Rec Air gang back then. You'd go to a site and I go, no, we're coats, we're exclusive coats here, and I go, okay. But so I'd take that a couple of times, and I'd go, well, how can I overcome that? So I'd say my response would be, okay, I understand you've got a contract with your current supplier, but all I ask is when they can't help you, give me a call. Just give me one chance, and I'll prove that we can help you. And so then I'd say, but there's one condition. Once I help you, I need your business from then on. And I remember there was a site, a Thies job that I was trying to get. They were exclusive coats back in the day. And this guy asked me for a thing called a tremie bucket. And I'd never heard of a tremie bucket, but apparently it was like a kibble bucket where you put concrete in, but you can pour underwater. I said, I'll find you one. I didn't know where it was. And we had one, and it was in Gladstone. So I rang the guy up, said, we got one, shipped down from Gladstone. And I kept saying to him, remember the deal. So I helped him out, and that's how I got that business. And I think just that determination to come to turn that client around, and just being inventive about how you're going to win that work. And that was one of the things I had in the back of my head. That was one of my plans. How can I get these guys away from another supplier? So that was my catch cry. Give me a call, and I'll be the guy that makes it happen for you. And it'd be our team that made it happen. But from then on, we want the business. So yeah, those little things, I just got a kick out of doing that, and winning business, and and helping people out. Because like I used to go out and someone wouldn't know how to do a job and go, why don't we try this, and this, and it was just helping people out, getting things done, and the results flow from that.
Kev, today we've spoken a lot about Kevin Ennis, the salesperson, and your amazing career in the equipment rental industry, but not about Kevin Ennis, the man. Last November at the HRA AGM, the story was told on how you take large bags of kids' clothes when you're on sales trips to small country towns in far west Queensland, clothes that your kids necessarily would have grown out of, to kids in the local areas that didn't actually have shops in these small country towns. Kev, I think this story really does display your approach to, obviously, life, to give back to those around you and support building a relationship with people. I'm sure this has changed vastly throughout your career and throughout your life, but how do you define success?
Oh, look, it is a really interesting question, and success to me has changed over the last 35 years. So when I started at Rec Air, success to me was becoming a salesman. Like, to me, that was where I wanted to be. That's what I wanted. And I got there and it was amazing. And then after that, it was like I was in a sales team of 17 guys and I wanted to be recognised by my peers as one of the best. So I wanted to be in the top 3 of the sales guys in our region. And then I become that. And then I wanted to be number 1, and then I become that. And then, it got to things like, it depends where you are with your family and stuff. So when I had a family, it was important that I was successful financially. So sales was one of the things that got me there as well. But it does change, and now my kids are gone, and we're not rich, but we're comfortable. Money isn't everything to me, but it's more helping people, and I believe that I just want to give back to people. I really do. Like, I see young guys like you, and I'm so impressed, and we've got a good future, and I get a kick out of seeing young fellas develop and when I say young people develop and grow, and to me, that's I believe is part of my success, if I can help someone get there. And I guess ultimately now success for me is spending some quality time with my family and doing what I like to do. And I guess that's now a lot of people would deem that as being successful, when you can have that happy balance between the two. And so like Rec Air days, we used to work 7 to 5, and like I'd be there at 6 and leave there at 6, and we'd have beers after work and get home at 7. And so all that, you weren't, not that you weren't encouraged to spend time with your family, you didn't have a lot of time with your family. But now it's more important to ensure that you spend quality time with your family. And to me, that is the ultimate success, where you can have a happy balance between the two and make some decent money along the way. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, Kev, thank you. I've been really looking forward to this episode. I knew we'd have a great conversation, and with your extensive career in the equipment rental industry, and I'm sure you'll be in the industry for as long as you can be going forward. So thank you very much for coming on the Rental Journal. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks, mate. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I would like to just say that, I keep saying it, the rental industry is such an amazing industry, and it's really helped. Well, I wouldn't be where I am today. But I'd just like to say to people out there that are trying to get into sales or want to be better at sales, if that's what you want to do, just keep persisting, and it's a great thing. And the biggest insult to me would be if someone considered that I was like a car salesman or something like that, and that's something I'd never ever wanted to be. And so I think if you're true to yourself, and you're true to your clients, and you look after them, I think it'll all come. So, but I love the industry, and I can't do enough to sort of pay back. So yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I know the industry loves you too, Kev. So thank you very much for coming on the Rental Journal.